All right. Welcome to episode 1 of MapleBased podcast. I'm joined here with the Manny_Ottawa.
Hello, Chris.
Hello. And he is also my dad. So this is going to be a fun little walkthrough of his daily content. He does daily posts on Instagram and Twitter. Was on Twitter in 2019 and amassed how many followers?
I was close to 40,000.
Yeah,
and I got booted off Twitter just before the Canadian 2019 election. I wonder why.
And you were one of the first ones to get booted off.
Yeah,
so
I beat Trump and the
you're a
rest of the
pioneer.
world. Pioneer of being booted off. Chris, tell me,
Yes.
MapleBased, what does that mean? This is your company.
MapleBased, yeah. So this is something I thought of where maple is as Canadian as it gets. Love the taste too, so I'll put maple on everything. So we're Canadian content and also of the world as well, U.S., everywhere else, but mainly Canadian. And based, to me, is means you kind of stand your ground, or you're based, you're fact-driven, opinionated, kind of pushback against another narrative.
Now, I see based to stand for as fundamentally durable through time, doesn't change with the various opinions of the day. It's based, it's sturdy, it's there. It's good in 1940, it's good in 1960, it's good in 1980, it's good year 2000, and it's good year 2020.
Yeah, so and I think that everybody's based is going to be different. So
yeah, sure.
You'll have your right and left based, which are going to think they're right and they stand their ground or they got the information, but both are on opposite sides of the spectrum. So that's why this is hopefully going to find a universal base. That's what the whole reason behind this podcast was to find that center line and to bring people both back to the center line.
And being
facts. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Real facts, not the ones that are administered by the media,
yeah.
but as best we can that are unassailable facts. If we can all agree to unassailable facts, then we are moving to put people together.
Yeah, we have to find that common ground where that 1 + 1 = 2 again, rather than just digits and digits equals question mark. So we'll try to get a common sense here. But yeah, here's the intro. And we're back. So yeah, this is how it's going to work. We're going to dissect. We'll go through either your Twitter, if it does come back, or your Instagram. And we'll go through piece by piece or post by post. We'll kind of put more focus on the relevant ones. So here's one that you did today that has.
There I took a clip.
There is no we. We? Who's we?
This is from Breaking Bad.
There is no we.
I love that clip.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that clip is right now I see a shifting in people. The people that were hateful and discriminatory against the unvaccinated, to say that, well, we didn't know. We all didn't know. We now know, but we didn't know then. And I didn't like that because it's offensive.
Mm-hmm.
We is a word that means all of us.
All inclusive.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't.
Yeah,
and
it was definitely not
what
all
they're
inclusive
talking about
during then.
The we that they're talking about
was
are
exclusive we.
Yeah, and the ones that were uninformed. And I put at the bottom, the true we, the people actually did their own research, as I did, would have known. And you might remember, Chris, I think it was as early as the first month of vaccines. Vaccines started in December 15th or so. And by January, the first week in January, we saw breakthrough cases. So they called them breakthrough cases. Mm-hmm. And the media uses the language breakthrough to symbolize it's very
It can
rare.
happen. It can happen.
It rarely happen.
Doesn't happen often, but it
it's
can.
It's a breakthrough case.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen. It's very rare. So they already tainted the vaccinated that got COVID as a rare exception. Well, that was the language they used. In fact, they used that language almost a year later, but the media did, and I noticed it. But if you look at drill down on the real facts coming from countries that were well in advance of their vaccination.
You have a post down here.
Yeah, Israel was at least 50-60% vaccinated by the time we even started. And they were seeing the vaccinated getting COVID as much as the unvaccinated. In fact, it was an equal proportion of it. So
this breakthrough. Now this is the Ontario.
No, that's
cases.
Ottawa. No, that's
just Ottawa alone. But either way, the breakthrough cases where we were hearing were around what this.
Yeah, that would have been around then.
June or something where these were breakthrough cases.
Yeah.
But then remember, you looking at the Israel numbers, or I think it was somewhere else as well. But you had these massive spikes that happened post that second shot.
That's right.
So we knew that it wasn't breakthrough, and it was mass spikes post-vaccination on numerous countries before we even had our second doses here in Canada.
Right. So just to give you the timeline of it, around February, Israel started seeing many vaccinated people getting COVID. And remember, they've already been 3 months vaccinated by then because they were very quick. Around March, April, the vaccinated infection rate was equal to the unvaccinated. In fact, COVID was hitting both communities the same, and both were about 50%. There were 50% fully vaccinated and 50% unvaccinated. We saw that. And that's when Israel started saying, well, maybe we need the third vaccine. That is an admission. By the time Israel got to the third vaccine, we started going to our first and second vaccine. So the evidence
and
was
excited about the launch, and the push was strong then.
Yeah.
Even with notwithstanding all this information elsewhere.
Exactly. And we knew by then that the vaccines didn't
curb the spread
whatsoever. But in politics, and I've been involved in that for about 40 years, it's a great tool to divide a people to win elections. The Liberal Party and Trudeau saw an opportunity. At that time, I think we were about 70% vaccinated, maybe 75, 80. And that's a great tool to say, hey, pit the 80% against the 20%.
Yeah, and even O'Toole, who was championing for the other side, was afraid to change that narrative. And he was kind of teetering in the middle, like, no, I support the unvaxxed, but not really.
Everybody was afraid.
So it was like 100% push.
So that tool worked. And in fact, it was, you might remember, there were 2 Quebec MPs who broke rank, and I forget their names. I made a post on this a while ago, and you could search it. But they basically said that they knowingly politicized the vaccinated and unvaccinated because it worked for election basis.
Yeah, and he grinded out an ultra minority win.
Right, and it makes sense. And I'm sure politicians did this in the 1950s and 1940s, discriminating against blacks, discriminating against homosexuals. It's really easy to win elections if you speak to the 80% against the 20%, whether it be in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, whatever
or 60s,
the 20% would be, which changes decade over decade, whatever that 20%.
And this year they decided to make the unvaccinated the point of the Sharpie point of discrimination for the politicians.
And that's why, actually, going back to this post, there's always been a we.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's always been a we as far back as you can go. Yeah. And now they're saying that, we weren't the ones discriminating. We weren't part of that we. Everyone was in it together.
Yeah, and that's why I made the post today.
Yeah.
You take accountability. If you do wrong. In fact, I go further and say that.
Yeah, nothing changes if there's no accountability taken, which is what everyone's been waiting for, I think, throughout this whole thing.
Right. But there's something more fundamental, Chris, and that is you do not discriminate even for good reasons. Listen, everybody every time was saying, well, of course we discriminate against the gays because, they are mentally ill. It's the right thing to do. There's always a scientific reason to discriminate, or you can base a false scientific reason to discriminate. Discrimination is always wrong. There is no basis for discrimination whatsoever. And here I am, I'm a chartered lawyer, Chris, which means that I got called to the bar. I graduated in 1979. The charter came in 1983. I was a young lawyer, and the charter meant everything to my generation of lawyers. And to sit there and see in 40 years the charter being shredded, put and destroyed for an unscientific reason, it was just a problem.
Which is clear now.
Oh, very
clear. There's
clear.
no apologizing
and even
apologizing to the charter trampling or to any individual freedom trampling.
Right.
It's just moving on.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
if you go to my
dangerous.
older posts, I even said at that time I was uncertain, even before there was any test on the vaccines. I basically said it's still wrong to discriminate based on science. I mean, if that's the case, I mean, you could discriminate against the obese. The science is very clear. The science is very clear that 80% of all hospitalization, the 25,000 beds in Ontario. So not the few hundred that we talk about with the unvaccinated. There are about 70 to 80% of all hospitalization scientifically be traced to obesity. Can you imagine if you use science?
And there hasn't been a minute of discussion on that.
Well, yeah, and it's not the discussion I'm talking about. Can you imagine if
No, but putting it at the forefront and creating a discussion saying this is wrong, because you're not allowed to say that's wrong right now for some reason, even though it does occupy 80% of our hospital
and
beds.
they're not saying it.
Exactly.
But my point is something even bigger. Can you imagine? They do have the scientific base. They actually have the scientific reason to sit there and say, look, from obesity comes 8 or 9 different type of illnesses that clog our hospital. The science is clear. Unlike the
biggest comorbidity is...
unlike the vaccines where the science weren't clear and we actually discriminated. Can you imagine if we moved to discriminating against the obese, saying you can't be on a plane, you can't go to restaurants because you're clogging up our hospitals? I would fight against that even though the science was clear. But here we have the unvaccinated and the vaccines where the science is not clear. The science is the opposite, and we discriminate again. Yeah. So this is the worst discrimination in my lifetime.
Yeah, agreed. And they were ready to charge the unvaccinated for hospital beds or to charge them an extra fee.
There was a poll out, and I posted it.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if you can find it, but there was a poll out where CTV actually even asked, should we imprison people who don't take the vaccine?
Yes.
Can you imagine
and that was the
nonsense?
The narrative which people
That's
forget.
How they hate. And if you were
here, this is the one here.
Like imagine change that.
This is CTV, so a Canadian news organization.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was the 3 options were jail time, be denied healthcare, or no penalty.
Right, no
penalty. So 2 absolute terrible options or no penalty.
Now change that. Can you imagine if the narrative was obesity is now clogging up our hospitals, and they said, should we give jail time to anyone's BMI? And you know how we traced everybody. So everybody going to their hospital and their doctors, and they have to have a BMI test every week in order to continue their job. And if your BMI exceeds something, you lose your job, you lose your ability to travel, and you lose. I mean, it's just absolute madness.
But in that, I think 20 to 25% of Canadians are obese, where at this point only... I think so.
A little more.
No, I think America's a little more. I think Canada's like 20 to 25. I think. Remember,
America's closer
to
50.
But you can you can't infringe on a 1 in 4, but you can infringe on the unvax, which were 1 in 12 or 13. You know, where you can kind of shove.
Well,
them
I think it's because it was new, Chris. I mean,
and
one thing about our generation, Chris, or your generation, certainly not where I come from, there seems to be a complete forgetting of history and forgetting of what happened before. Everything is new today. Like, it's called SARS-CoV-2. That means it's a second COVID virus in that range. But if you ask anybody, this is a brand new deadly
what was
virus.
that 2009 one there? The other
that was
COVID.
H1N1
one.
Yeah, H1N1. And that was another pandemic that we dealt with.
That was an easy peasy one, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but we treated it the same way. There was no hype. We still believe it in freedom.
And social media is kind of ramped up, and it's in full kind of
I think there's
echo chamber mode now, where it's tough to.
But I think there's a desire with this generation that everything is different, everything is new. I mean, you look at it,
and there's one way to think. I think with this generation, there's one right and all wrong.
It's never happened before.
You join this thought process, or you're wrong, which is strange.
Oh, and it's never happened before. We've never seen this before. Well, we have. We've had viruses before. We've never. I mean, global warming is. Well, we won't get into.
Go back to so eventually, but go back to Fauci's mask thing at the beginning of the whole thing, where he explicitly said, "Oh no, you could be touching your face. The masks don't work for this." Blah blah blah. I mean, so he knew. He studied his whole 40 years career. He's going to know.
Masks have been studied for about 100 years. Yeah. Masks aren't, and I did a post on this too, and it's hard to find it, but masks are not high-tech they haven't reached a high-tech conversion to a new system. It's the same mask that we used 30, 40, 50 years ago. Same thing. So it's not new technology. And masks up to... Now, here's the point,
What about
Chris.
the
Here's the point, Chris, that you should...
N95? Is that newer?
No, that's been around forever.
Okay.
I mean, I have one from your granddad's garage, so it's been around for a long time. But here's the interesting thing with masks: how do I know that they do not work? Because
Somebody else has to wear them in order for you to be okay
no,
in yours.
no, that's true. But just think of it: when COVID hit, 2019, we truly. I'm going to accept this. We really didn't know what COVID was. We were big fear that mortality rate was 3.4% of the population, which would mean about 600,000 in Canada, which would mean about 6 million in America. So it was a fearful thing. We really didn't know.
That was the CDC's claim right at the beginning of March,
Actually,
April.
It was WHO.
Who?
WHO. So we didn't know. We knew it was extremely deadly because the first wave was extremely deadly because it really focused on the older people and they were dying from it. At no time in the first wave, at no time did one doctor say we should be wearing masks. Now, Fauci said the opposite.
Yes.
Dr. Tam said the opposite. So if you're thinking logically, either masks do not work or every health professional was committing criminal gross negligence by not...
For a full year before.
Well, not a full year. It started in
whatever,
June. The first wave. The very first wave. So the very first wave...
And I don't think it was mandatory that first Christmas, so I think it was that first year.
No.
Masks.
It started becoming, I think it was around June.
Maybe the Christmas season.
It started becoming... But I'm just looking by waves. The very first deadly wave... that no one person suggested masks. Masks in Ottawa, because that's the city that I live in, started becoming in vogue around June, July, then became mandatory soon thereafter. So the very first wave, where there were no vaccines, where it was new, there was no immunity.
Where they had a lifetime of data before.
Right. And they didn't recommend masks.
Yeah, exactly.
So now all of a sudden masks
and go back to that chart again.
There we go. Well, that chart tells you everything.
This thing again. When were masks mandatory? For sure before this point.
Yeah, no. So if you look at that, so I actually
you
put
had
it down
that,
there. So this is from the city of Ottawa, and you see there in the very first wave,
I guess we can just keep going.
Nobody had any masks, and there were no vaccines.
Right here.
Yeah.
In this first little part, no masks.
Right. And then masks started coming in. And
then they get but what if masks weren't here? How much higher would that spike go?
Well, yeah, but you can science says follow number one. Fauci did say, and I'll give you one of my personal experiences. In the first wave, when we were locked down and we were totally afraid, people were washing their countertops, they were washing the food,
grocery bags,
all that stuff. So I was, my in-laws were alive then. I was doing shopping for my family, my in-laws, and another family. And because I actually didn't think the risk was what it was. I didn't believe the hype, but I went out to the grocery stores. There was no masks. Nobody wore masks, but we did stay 6 feet apart. We were very careful about that. Then, and I continued my food runs, and then when mask was introduced, I was at a Loblaws, and this guy comes to talk to me, a complete stranger, talked to me about the watermelons. We were both wearing masks, and he was within about a foot of me. And I thought, wait a minute, Fauci was right. Masks give you a false sense of security. So here's this guy talking right beside me,
using a disposable little one-ply
and not 6 feet
mask.
away, because we all think masks work, and everyone touches it. And Fauci was right, and Tam was right. Every time you touch your mask, you're touching your face more, and these things aren't sealed. So you look at the actual data.
An airborne virus too that's going to squeeze right through that mask.
Right.
No matter
You look
what.
at the actual data, and every wave was worse than the last wave, even though we're bringing in more measures, masks, vaccine. And the worst wave was December 2021, 2021, January 2022, where we were all vaccinated, or mostly all vaccinated, and we're all wearing masks, and there were vaccine passport jurisdictions. You couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't go to... And look at that. It was the worst wave. So that should tell you something.
That's 2022, this one.
That's December
Exactly.
to
Where they had to stop the vaccinated, too, from going into public spaces as well.
Yeah.
So anyways, this is, we should wrap this up, but this was episode 1. So fun. We'll see where it goes. This is our first time doing it. So we have no idea the journey that this is going to take us on, but we're excited for it and hope to give you guys a little more information and be part of the conversation and debrief some more. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye-bye.